Awesome, cool. Let's get it kicked off. Hey everybody, I'm CK Umachi, one of the leaders of the Stanford Blockchain Club. Today we have with us a very exciting panel focused on Ethereum scalability. So blockchain scalability, but more broadly focused on Ethereum. And we have with us some of the trailblazers in the space working on these solutions that are hoping to make Ethereum a little bit more accessible and usable. So with us, we have Arjun Kalsi from Polygon, the VP of Growth. We have Alex Glukowski from Matter Labs, and Alan Chu from Boba Network, and also the CEO of Enya.ai. Excited to have you all with us today. We're going to talk about a lot of things covering scalability, covering Ethereum, covering the crypto space broadly. Before we get into any of the specifics, wanted to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. So starting with Arjun, how did you get into the blockchain space? And then also, how did you end up in your specific role? And anything else you want us to know about yourself?
Sure, thanks, CK. Thank you for having me. So hey guys, so I'm Arjun. I head ecosystem growth at Polygon. And for me, my journey started in about 2015, 2016. So at that time, I was working in an IT services company, and then the CTO over there had tasked me with figuring out, what would be the technologies of tomorrow, which are going to change everything. So I sort of went through this entire AI and machine learning, etc. And then I came across blockchain technology. I read the Bitcoin white paper, and I kind of became obsessed with that idea. So much so that I sort of decided, this is going to be my career, and this is it. And then we sort of helped build the sort of blockchain business unit within that IT services company. Then I sort of moved out from there. So I've worked in an AI startup as well. So I've been connected to the space. I've worked across many different technologies. I kind of joined Polygon just when the mainnet went live. So I was tasked with sort of building out the ecosystem, hiring the team, setting all the processes in place, building out developer relations and all of that. So I've been doing that for the past year. And it's been a pretty pretty wild time. Over the past year, we've grown a lot. Um, I think last year, if you'd sort of told me that we would be where we are today, and I would have said you crazy. But it feels good, and I think we're just scratching the surface of what we are, where we are with blockchain technology. I still tell people it's still day one. There's so much to do, and yeah, I mean, this is the second coming of the internet. It's still the 90s, so there's so much more when it comes to education, infrastructure, technology. I mean, the list is endless. So it's lots of sleepless nights for us to continue to keep building and ensuring that we're able to bring the best to the community. So that's kind of our plan at Polygon. As we have this conversation today, I'd love to sort of talk more about what we have in store. So yeah.
Love that. It's definitely been exciting on the outside looking in, so I'm sure it's been exciting on the inside. Alex, you want to tell us more about your journey to Matter?
Absolutely. So hi CK, thank you for the opportunity to talk here, and hi everyone. My name is Alex Glukowski. I'm CEO and co-founder of Matter Labs, the company behind ZK Sync, and we started working on ZK Sync 3 years ago. My previous background was software engineering. I was CTO in a couple of startups, and I was very passionate about Liberty and Bitcoin when I first learned about it, and Ethereum, because I saw the potential of these technologies to change the like political landscape, the power distribution of the world, and create a lot of economic empowerment and a lot more freedom and economy. And it was obvious already back 3 years ago that if the promise of crypto is to be fulfilled, then it must be scalable to everyone in the world, or to billions of people. And it was also obvious that no technology that existed back then would fulfill this promise without making sacrifices on either security or decentralization. And by decentralization, I mean being unstoppable. You can always create something that is like pretty secure because you use cryptography, but then if you have just a few parties, powerful actors can come to those parties and shut them down. So Ethereum and Bitcoin are kind of unstoppable. They are so massive that it's really, really hard. Like it costs a lot of money to just disrupt them. But even if you do that, users can always fork away, and like all the users who want to participate in the FAIR protocol can still participate there. So I was really curious how to solve this problem. And then the solution arrived with zero knowledge proofs. It's like, this is like the only technology we have now that can scale indefinitely, like completely limitless. You can aggregate arbitrary number of transactions in a single proof. So yeah, this is, so I saw that. I found a co-founder who was an expert in cryptography, and we started working and built what we have now with ZK-Sync.
Very exciting.
Yeah, and yeah, we just a short addition. Yesterday we announced that we raised $50 million from a number of investors led by Andreessen Horowitz, and we're really excited to bring EVM compatible ZK rollup to Ethereum scaling.
Wow, that is news to me, and that's very exciting. So congratulations on that. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Awesome. Alan, you want to tell us about your journey to both Enya and then Boba network as it's been recently deployed? So one, congrats on that, but two, would love to hear more.
Thank you, and congrats, Alex. Good news all around. So my name is Alan Xu. I grew up in Hong Kong and Vancouver, Canada. I'm also a Stanford GSB alum. I'm on the alumni board of the GSB, and I've been also running Stanford Angels Network for 8 years now and scaled it to a global syndicate of Stanford alums who invest in startup. My journey into blockchain actually stretched way back because I did my electrical engineering and computer science degree at UBC in Vancouver. And after that, I jumped into a distributed systems startup. That one went public. And then later on in my career, I was head of product of another startup that was building globally scalable storage systems for storage cloud. So British Telecom was one of our customers. And through these experiences, I became fascinated by by software systems that would just never go down. And so when blockchains came along, of course, it was just another level of breakthrough by creating systems that would not only never go down, but without any single points of control. And I felt that I needed to get involved one way or another. And by then I had become a VC, I was investing, and I thought, I became increasingly restless seeing some of my smartest friends, one after another, jumping into blockchain space. So 3 years ago, I got the opportunity to co-found Enya with Stanford engineering professor Jan Laporte, who's been teaching blockchain at Stanford for several years now, and many of you probably have been his students. And we wanted to do something around decentralized infrastructure for privacy. And fast forward to earlier this year, we came upon the opportunity of a really unique, probably first in the industry type of transaction, where we were able to do a reverse takeover of an existing crypto project, blockchain project called OMG. And we saw that as an accelerated way to get to market and to build a community around a layer 2. Because OMG, while Plasma, the project, never got a lot of traction, it did build a really vibrant community around the project. And we felt that having a community around any sort of blockchain is actually critical to its vitality and longevity. And so then we decided to build around the optimistic rollup architecture, because we actually surveyed a lot of different options, but fundamentally we felt that Ethereum compatibility is paramount, and running Ethereum itself on Ethereum is really the best way to ensure compatibility. So that's the way the architecture that we settled on. But we didn't want to just create another layer 2. We took a step back and looked at what's really holding back Ethereum. It's not just its cost and its limited capacity for transactions, but how little you can actually do in a smart contract. And we thought that there has to be, if we're going to fulfill the full promise of Ethereum, we have to be able to recruit top engineers from places like Google to jump into this movement. And that means giving them the power to still do machine learning and data science and everything that they're used to. And that's why we're going to be rolling out something called hybrid compute on Boba in the next quarter, so that smart contracts that are running on Boba could optionally trigger code that runs on AWS Lambda. And we give developers the power to decide what they want to run in a smart contract versus what they want to run off-chain, and have the ability to pull results back from their AWS Lambda processes back into the smart contract. It's a whole new way of building, designing your dApps. We can't wait to see what developers do with it.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Can't wait to kind of see more about that. However, let's take a step back. There are definitely some folks either on the call or who will be watching this video who are newer to the space. There's been a lot of energy on campus. A lot of people are starting to take their first dive into the crypto space. So for those folks, can one of you, and I'll let you all decide who, describe what scalability is and why it's important specifically within the Ethereum ecosystem.
Alan, you want to go, or I can try?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. So I think there's been a lot of ink spilled talking about scalability from a speeds and feeds point of view. How do we make things faster and cheaper? Certainly very, very important. And the way we look at scalability is we want to address this neglected dimension of scalability, scaling what you can actually do on the platform. And that goes back to what I described earlier, hybrid compute, giving developers more powers and build more interesting apps so that we can 10x or even 100x the number of developers that are building on Ethereum, because you need to have that level of developer activities to drive creativity, to deliver a more variety, diverse set of dApps to end users so that we can grow this whole ecosystem together.
That's a really cool perspective. I want to talk about a different dimension that is actually like trying to define in a more narrow sense what scalability is specifically for blockchains like Ethereum. And we can start by saying what it is not. It is not just improving throughput, because if you like you can have an Postgres database that handles 1 million transactions per second and just commits that to Ethereum as a hash of those transactions. Is it going to be improved scalability? Obviously not, because you're not going to have all the security and decentralization properties of Ethereum. So I would define scalability as increasing throughput while not increasing the load on the full nodes of the network. Like preserving the validator set that you have in your network. So preserving the properties of don't trust, verify, and doing this at scale, meaning higher throughput while not increasing the requirements for the nodes. Because the other way to do it is to say, yeah, we're gonna keep it decentralized and permissionless, and anyone can join and participate in validation, but we're just gonna demand that all of them are running machines with hundreds of CPUs and terabytes of memory, right? And this is what some of the chains are doing. But this would exclude the vast number of validators from participation, and it would massively reduce decentralization of your chain. So for Ethereum specifically, the design of the protocol, it was like by like intentionally made in such a way that every Ethereum full node can be run on a consumer hardware, so that as many people as possible, like the ordinary people, can run the verifier. So scalability is like increasing throughput while letting everyone verify all of the transactions from their laptop.
Awesome, thank you. I think that was a good summation of the problem broadly. And I know for me personally, I do a lot of different things in the space, but it becomes very difficult to use Ethereum on L1 when you're paying $400+ in fees just to do simple things like buying or selling an NFT. So you all are working on things that I definitely think are going to be critical for the future of Ethereum. But to that specific point, I do want to give you all a chance to kind of dive a little bit more deeply into your own iteration of solution. So maybe starting with Alex, at Matter Labs, can you explain, I guess, the chosen solution that you all are moving towards? And you've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but just kind of a chance to explain what you all are doing specifically with the ZK Syncs.
Sure. So ZK Sync is a ZK rollup that is a scaling solution that uses zero knowledge proofs, or more specifically, snarks, which is succinct. Like it's not zero knowledge because we don't use the zero knowledge property. It's just the term which everyone uses. More specific name would be succinct non-interactive arguments of knowledge, or snarks, which is a family of cryptographic protocols that attest to the integrity of computation. So you can perform a very large computation, produce the result of this and show this result, to share it with everyone or with a particular person, and provide a small proof, which is like maybe 1 kilobyte large, that can be used to check that the result actually is valid, because the verifier also knows the function that you use to compute the result. So we apply this to blockchains. We can take millions of transactions, thousands of transactions, and compute the new state of the chain after applying those transactions, and then just submit the commitment to this new state, the Merkle root, to Ethereum smart contract and provide the proof. And this way we do one single transaction on Ethereum, which is small enough and it's cheap to verify, but underneath we perform a very large number of transactions. And by verifying the basic transaction, you verify each single one of them. So you keep full security. It's fully guaranteed by math. You can't cheat there. So this technology just got mature in the last 3 years, like very rapidly, from the point where it was just a very theoretical academic construct to practical applications that are now powering billions of dollars worth of value. It was a also hard journey, like in the engineering challenges. The first version of the rollup, which we launched like a year and a half ago, was application specific. We could only do specialized operations. So the version 1, which is live on Ethereum, now only supports transfers and also now swaps and NFT minting, but this is all based on transfers. The new version, which everyone thought is only going to be possible in 3 years from now, can do generic smart contracts. And not only generic smart contracts, we can do actually EVM compatible smart contracts, because I agree with Alan, it's paramount importance to keep the ecosystem compatibility and to let people who have running systems on mainnet that have been battle tested with a lot of money and a lot of exposure to just be able to copy them and deploy instantly in this new environment and keep all the composability, all the interoperability properties with other protocols without having to do re-audits and starting development from scratch. So this is what we're building now. We just launched the very first Solidity application in the ZK rollup. It's a Farkov Uniswap live on our testnet for version 2, and soon we will open it to developers to try out stuff. It will have a lot of interesting properties, such as different modes of data availability, where you can combine the absolute security of Ethereum with very cheap transactions if you're willing to take some cuts in security, but it's still going to be part of the same composable ecosystem.
Very exciting.
I'll stop there and answer questions later.
Very exciting. Can't wait to see that rolled out beyond the testnet. Alan, you want to talk about what Boba's doing with optimistic rollups?
Sure, happy to. As the name implies, optimistic rollup basically assumes that transactions are valid until proven otherwise. So it's like assuming that you're innocent until proven guilty. But so what we do as a layer 2 is we process transactions as they come in through our sequencer, and then we write proofs back to layer 1 in batches, so that an independent process can look at the proofs and then check the validity of our transactions. And we're actually the first first optimistic rollup to release a community-run fraud detector. So you can actually go to GitHub and download it and start running it and keep us honest. Check if our sequencer is doing everything right. And if you find something wrong, that's when you kick off that dispute resolution process. This is how optimistic rollup works. And zooming out a little bit, we actually think that the divide between like different types of rollups sometimes is somewhat arbitrary. We think there are a lot of good ideas out there that could be mixed and matched into the same rollup architecture. So it'll be really interesting to see how the space evolves and what architecture we end up settling on as a collective of layer 2s.
Awesome, thank you for that. And Arjun, Polygon's definitely got a lot of traction this year. Do you want to explain how your solution works?
Sure, definitely. So our current ecosystem is on a proof of stake chain, and how this chain works is that it's a proof of stake chain. We have about 100 validators spread across the globe, so it's fairly decentralized. And we have about $2 billion of Matic already staked on the network. So it makes it like very secure. And what we've also done is that every 256 blocks, like this chain, Merkle routes the transactions and places a checkpoint on Ethereum, so that even in the worst case scenario, all the transactions and all the liquidity and whatever you have on your chain is provable. even in case like the chain sort of fails or there's some sort of mass exit scenario. So this gives it that little bit of added layer of security, and sort of we then sort of use Ethereum like a settlement layer of sorts, where we sort of place these checkpoints on Ethereum. And these checkpoints are also sort of placed in a decentralized manner. So 2/3 of the validators sort of have to sign off on a checkpoint, and then it's put on the Ethereum blockchain. And of course, if somebody can prove on Ethereum that this checkpoint is fraudulent, then 2/3 of the validators who signed off on it will lose their stake. So there's a slashing mechanism in place. So this is kind of how we've designed the chain. And I think, both Alan and Alex talked about some very valid points, that whenever you're trying to solve scalability, you have to ensure that it's not at the cost of decentralization or at any sort of security. In terms of what we're building, and what we envisage like Polygon to be, is Polygon, we've sort of designed it as an aggregator of many different scaling solutions. So Alan talked about optimistic rollups. Alex, of course, is and his team is working on ZK rollups. But what we want to be is an aggregator where all these different kinds of chains exist under one single window, and this entire ecosystem is governed by one token, which is currently a Matic network token. So this way, a developer comes to one place, has access to every type of scaling solution possible, whether they want to use optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, whatever have you, and then can come to just one place and be able to solve whatever they want to do. And similarly for the users as well. And all the bridging and all the tooling, etc., is something which we're also building so that you can seamlessly move across chains. In terms of our technology roadmap, I would definitely say that we are pretty much all in on ZK rollups. I think we've done a fair amount of research from our side as well. What we feel is, again, this is like just our opinion based on our research, that ZK rollups is the way forward. And I think Alex talked about it, is the holy grail of ZK rollups is EVM ZK rollup, so that all your code is reusable, right? So everything you have on Ethereum, everything you have on Polygon, you can just use the same code and have all the advantages of ZK rollups. And also, Alex also talked about something very interesting, which is using data availability. So I think if I were to just maybe take a step back, one of the problems which we've always faced in Ethereum is that if you were to imagine Ethereum, and again, really taking a step back, but if you were to imagine Ethereum like a computer, right, which has compute and memory, like compute being the smart contract execution layer, and then memory being sort of the blockchain. You're always constrained by that particular, let's say, construct, right? And whatever you need to do within that construct is so you're always constrained by the amount of compute and memory available. By taking compute outside, which is basically what rollups do, right? The rollups is a smart way where you take compute outside, and then, but the memory is still on Ethereum. So you posting call data and the proof on Ethereum. And thereby, you can recreate the proof on Ethereum. It gives you very high security. And of course, optimistic rollups uses, like sort of has a different way of sort of a fraud-proof mechanism, while a ZK rollup has more of a validity-proof mechanism. That being said, rollups, this is what fundamentally rollups do. We take execution outside, and then you put the data on Ethereum. But if you could take the data also outside, so you have Ethereum as a construct, you take computation outside, you take data outside. Now you can scale these, sort of factors infinitely. Right? You could scale compute infinitely, you could scale memory infinitely, and then you could just put the proofs onto Ethereum, thereby, using Ethereum like a settlement layer. So this is kind of what we are also trying to do with data availability. So we built like Polygon Avail, which is a data availability blockchain, whose job is essentially just to ensure data availability. And what we expect is in the future, many other rollups will use this data availability chain and be able to create like ZK rollup, or rather validity proofs, or what we call validum in some sense, and then be able to put those proofs onto Ethereum, and thereby creating like a sort of an infinitely scalable sort of layer. So from that perspective, this is also what we're looking to do. And then, like I said, we were also looking into optimistic rollups. In terms of ZK, we've recently sort of joined hands with Hermes. We spent $250 million on that collaboration. We've actually earmarked to focus on ZK technology. And interestingly, the 750 million left, we've already spent it. So we've actually collaborating with 4 other teams, and we'll be making those announcements very soon. So we are pretty much, I dare say, all in on ZK technology and its ability to sort of create that ultimate scalability situation where you have EVM, you have ZK, all your proofs are automatically valid, and you have infinite scalability. So yeah.
Wow, I remember seeing the Hermes announcement. So hearing about the other ones that are in flight is exciting as well. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a lot of good information from all 3 of you. Excited to see the iterations of these come out and come to fruition. However, on the flip side, some of the questions I do hear from others when talking about layer 2 and sidechain solutions and Ethereum scalability broadly are, one, Ethereum 2.0 that is on the horizon. A lot of people are looking at that as the next iteration of Ethereum to help scalability broadly. So when you look at Ethereum 2.0, how does that impact the necessity of your solutions? So for whoever wants to take that first, how does Ethereum 2.0 impact your thought process on how necessary your solutions are?
Yeah, we're super excited about Ethereum 2.0 because, like, let's face it, right? Whoever complained about the internet being too fast, right, or too cheap, right? Same thing here. Like Ethereum 2.0 rolling out, great. It's great for all the rollups because architecturally, whatever you do on rollups will always be more cost effective than the main chain. So it's just going to keep dropping the cost of doing anything on Ethereum further. And what that means is it's going to induce a lot more demand and make the Ethereum ecosystem much more accessible to a lot more people. So can't wait for that to happen.
Right. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead, Alex. I'll then go after you.
Yeah, just want to join and say that Ethereum 2.0, specifically sharding, will just increase the base bandwidth of Ethereum, and the rollups indeed are scaling whatever you have on the base by constant factors. So it will be just like better for all users because you're going to have more transactions.
No, definitely, and of course, that'll be great for the ecosystem, and this is exactly what we need, to bring in a number of users. However, like to the question that would ETH 2.0 make, let's say, rollups or scalability solutions obsolete? Like I would still say that is actually not true, and there are two ways of looking at it, right? One is towards when you look at it from what Vitalik has always talked about, where whenever he talks about like Ethereum 2.0, he always talks about a sort of a roll-up sort of infrastructure, right? Which would sort of, so you could say like you have the ultimate settlement layer, which is Ethereum, then you have like sort of the business of the transaction layer on top of Ethereum, where sort of the business will happen, where you have all your microtransactions happening at scale and all of that. But the other way of looking at it is just purely mathematically, right? So what Ethereum 2.0 promises is 100,000 TPS, right? I mean, that's the stat which came out. Now you multiply 100,000 TPS with 86,400, which is the number of seconds in a day. So you theoretically have a maximum number of transactions you can do in a day. Divide that by 10 million, right? And you will arrive at the number of 864, right? So if 10 million people were using ETH 2.0 simultaneously, right, you would have 864 transactions per person per day. And this is not counting, these are people, by the way, this is not counting devices on all the other infrastructure, which will also be writing to the blockchain, right? And in comparison, Android has 1 billion users in the world today. So even with 100,000 TPS, which sounds like a big number, right? Like, wow, 100,000 TPS. But if you just go through the math, it's actually not that much. And if you want, if like, and the kind of future which, all of us are working for, like, which Alan, Alex, all of us, dream about, is hundreds of millions of people using blockchain technology, playing games, DeFi, and it becoming sort of a part of our daily life. Like for that, the kind of scalability you need for that future, like you would have to have some sort of, let's say, scalability solution. Even the internet has, CDNs or content delivery networks, right, to give you that last mile boost. So this is something similar to that, where even in the best case scenario, ETH 2.0 may not be enough, and you will need a scalability layer to really build that future of tomorrow. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Definitely, as I look forward into the future, if what I believe is going to happens, there's going to be so many more transactions happening. And to your comment about like 1 billion users for some of these other non-crypto specific applications, for crypto to be able to kind of replicate that, there's going to be so much more scaling that's going to need to happen. So definitely exciting hearing you all add some color to that. So kind of similar question in the same vein, taking a step outside of the Ethereum ecosystem, there's a lot of competitors who are doing things in a way that a lot of people are really appreciating. So Solana kind of being one of the big ones, of course, Avalanche, and a few other competitors that are offering low cost, fast transactions, fairly decentralized. How do you look at those competitors in comparison to Ethereum with the scaling solutions as you guys are proposing? And Is there any room for you all to work with them? Is that on the roadmap? Are you considering tapping into some of these other ecosystems as well?
I can start then.
Alex, go ahead, please.
So the technology we're building, generally all L2 technologies are base layer agnostic, so they could be deployed on any chain. I think that the main job of the base layers is to ensure decentralization, because as I said before, I'm a skeptic of centralized systems in general. You can, like eventually they will be subject to a lot of pressure and they will have to give in. So you want to remain resilient, and like you can only remain resilient if you're like massively decentralized, not just with tens or hundreds of validators, but thousands and tens of thousands. So like if a layer one chain emerges that is better than Ethereum in this regard, then we can deploy rollups on this chain. Otherwise, I just don't see much sense in this. But though the current alternatives to Ethereum actually claim to be scalable at the base layer, and they will reach their limits at some point. So I'm sure they will be interested in deploying L2 technologies. It's just a matter of, like, is there a point of doing this or not? And I think the market is clearly saying that decentralization is valuable. We see it with Ethereum. People are still willing to pay a lot of money on Ethereum rather than transacting on other chains. And there's a lot more capital locked in Ethereum compared to the other chains, because people like, risks are hard to assess, but they're non-negligible. So that's my point.
I would say that so in terms of so a couple of things I think Alex talked about are make total sense, and I would agree that if suppose in the future tomorrow, like there were to be a sufficiently more decentralized, more performant kind of base layer, then of course most not only would scalability solutions maybe go towards that, but also the users ultimately would want to use what is the best solution out there. But what we've seen over a period of time is that now being around for almost 8+ years, is that every sort of base layer goes through its own evolution, sort of where you start out, you see some problems, you build on top of that, and we've seen with Ethereum with multiple forks and improvements, and what we've kind of realized, like because when we try to figure out what kind of scalability solutions we want to build from its inception in 2017, this is the mindset we had, that we'll build something which is sort of an L2 on all types of blockchains. But what attracted us towards Ethereum was basically the way Ethereum has been progressing, the network effects it has, and also like the philosophy of how Ethereum operates. Like, I don't know if you've had a chance to read about the philosophy of subtraction, which Ethereum follows, which basically, just to put it in a line, is that the true path to scalability is, comes when you actually relinquish control versus trying to control something. And by relinquishing control to the community, you're actually able to scale faster. And when you look at the philosophy of how Ethereum is chosen to scale, I think this is something which we feel is the right way, is the more democratic way of sort of going about building blockchain technology and sort of and bringing more people into the blockchain technology fold. So this is kind of why we always, are sort of very bullish on Ethereum, and we feel that Ethereum will be the ultimate settlement layer. And with the other, let's say, so every year there is some new ETH killer. Last year there was, today, maybe next year there'll be another new one. It's a yearly phenomena. What can I say? But what we also see is that all of these base layers are also going through their own evolution process. Like Solana had a huge outage for almost like 17 hours, right? And they've had one before as well. In fact, last year, if I remember, it was in December sometime. And similarly, if you see now the gas fees, etc., on Avalanche have also started like climbing. So all of these base layers will go through their own evolution process. It will take time. And for those who are using, let's say, who are not EVM compatible, right, who are using a new sort of language, they will have to reinvent all of the other infrastructure and elements all over again to be able to reach sufficient scale. So there's going to be a fair amount of time required for that. So I feel that if in the future one of these base layers does get there and becomes decentralized and is fairly democratic in the sense that anybody can spin up a validator and be a part of the network, then of course, everyone would gravitate towards such a solution. But I think for us, when we look at the future, we feel that the future will definitely be Ethereum as the prominent base layer. But again, this is just our opinion, who knows? So yeah, that's our opinion.
Yeah, so having been a venture investor for a while, I always pay attention to traction. So yes, Ethereum has a lot of competition, but it still has it has more capital locked on Ethereum than all the other Ethereum alternatives combined. Now, one has to wonder why, right? It's expensive, it's slow, but it's still the market leader by far. So you always pay attention to that, and it comes down to it's decentralized. It's decentralized nature. It provides the highest level of security that you can find out there for your crypto assets. And so by building layer 2s on top of Ethereum, we're helping Ethereum scale and remove some of these limitations so that we can extend those security benefits to a lot more folks and a lot more crypto assets. What I like to talk about is this notion of the crypto middle class, as in like there are more and more people getting into crypto, and as the portfolio grows, they'll start caring about that portfolio a lot more. Right? It's no longer just play money that getting thrown around. Oh yeah, if I lose it, it's just my annual Starbucks budget. It's no longer that, right? Once it becomes like 6 figures, you start caring about it, and you want to play secure, and they'll be attracted to Ethereum. And so, but these folks are not the whales that don't care about gas. They do care about gas. They do care about transaction costs. So, and that's a rapidly growing part of the market that layer 2s are primed to serve.
Awesome. A lot of great information and opinions there. I do want to ask a question that kind of builds off of that one. And this is kind of me taking out the crystal ball. Looking forward 10 years from now, which I think is a very tough question to answer. What is your best guess to what the not Ethereum, but broadly the crypto infrastructure landscape looks like? Is it, and I think I did hear some of this in the answers, is it going to be Ethereum with some of these scaling solutions dominated? Is it going to be more of a cross-chain environment where maybe people use different platforms or different layer 1s for different reasons? There's also Polkadot, of course, with its kind of unique architecture. So would love to kind of hear your best thoughts if you were explaining to somebody what you assume the crypto landscape broadly is going to look like in about 10 years. Any thoughts on that?
Well, 10 years is a long time, especially in crypto. That's more like, I don't know, a century. So that said, I think one could, so I'm super bullish on Ethereum. I might sound like an ETH maxi, but that said, I think that it's actually going to be a multi-chain environment with Ethereum still being dominant, but there will always be other alternatives. And here's why. There's no one size fits all when it comes to designing a distributed system. Like you just can't optimize for all of the variables with one base layer. Is impossible, right? And so there are going to be different base layers optimizing for different design attributes for different use cases, and that's great. And it also actually fosters innovation and creativity, because now you have different base layers that could experiment with different new design ideas, and also dApps that could try to deploy on different base layers and figure out what's best for them. And then on top of that, you've got layer 2 solutions that will help Ethereum and other base layers too, as they run into the limitations, to scale in a different dimension. And that all, I think, leads to a very vibrant, decentralized ecosystem. And so in that context, I think cross-chain bridging is going to be important, and we're seeing a lot of innovations in cross-chain bridging projects out there. So yeah, so that's my take on it. But again, 10 years is very, very far away.
Yeah, man, 10 years is literally, I can't imagine what happens here in 2 months is so much. But to be said, I kind of very agree with what Alan said, that ultimately what, again, at the risk of sounding like a ETH maxi, we also believe that Ethereum will be sort of the dominant sort of base layer for all other, and of course, business transactions will happen on rollups. And I think, like maybe one way of visualizing how this might work is that if you imagine every chain as like an island, right? And then you have cross-chain bridges, which are like bridges between these islands. And let's say you have people on all of these different islands, and let's say you leave that system alone for a while. Over a period of time, the crypto community will naturally gravitate towards that one ecosystem which suits their needs in the best way, right? And this and suit their needs, it could be in many different ways. It could be because of composability, that you come to one place and you have gaming, NFT, DeFi, everything, and you can do that. It could be decentralization, because we've seen that with Ethereum that people care about it. But over a period of time, the majority will gravitate towards this one ecosystem. What we feel, or what I feel, is that this ecosystem will be Ethereum. But that doesn't mean that the other chains will die. They will, of course, just like what Alan was saying, that there are only so many things you can optimize for, and there will always be room for some different kinds of solutions. So definitely, but the dominant player will in my opinion be Ethereum. Yes.
So I certainly agree with the idea that you can't have a solution with like one fits all, but I think we would rather see this variety of solutions on top of Ethereum than between layer ones, simply because there was this idea that you will not have one internet, that like each company, each organization will have their own intranets, but then they will just be loosely connected, but it never took off. Like what we ended up with was like one single internet, which is fully connectable, where you have a direct point-to-point protected, encrypted, and authenticated route between, like, for people to communicate. And on top of that, you have like layer 2 protocols like Google and Facebook and like all of the services which we have in the Web 2 world. So here's a similar thing. You just cannot have seamless interoperability between the chains that do not share the consensus. And this is for like, it has some fundamental technologically social reasons. Like consensus is about people agreeing on the validity of some stuff, and you can have subjective opinions, and you might want to fork away from a technology which you do not agree with, but you cannot have this like combination of this subjectivity on the one hand and objective facts on the other hand, which you can pass from one chain to another, simply because you don't, like, in this one chain, you do not know which canonical version of the other chain you're going to deal with. So this, maybe it's a bit complicated, but like it's to say you cannot pass messages natively between the chains. You will, like, whenever you have communication between chains, you will always rely on some other trusted parties. You can only have this trustless communication inside an ecosystem which is based on the same consensus layer. So that's why I believe that we will have an internet of blockchains, but like it's going to be the internet of rollups on Ethereum. Maybe not on Ethereum. Maybe there will be other chain which miraculously takes over and provides better decentralization. I just really doubt that, because of like it's too late to bootstrap such a system. Because Ethereum, like if Ethereum 2 launches soon and provides very broad data availability layer, everything else we can do on top of the rollups. So I don't think there is a chance for anyone to take it over.
Awesome. A lot of good information and insights. I really appreciate the answers. Last question for me before I open it up to some questions from the rest of our community. So Stanford Blockchain Club is launching our first ever accelerator program this year. And so this is part of that education series. So in December, we'll be kicking that off. With you all being some of the leaders in the space, building some of the solutions specifically in the Ethereum ecosystem, is there any advice you have for our community as they're thinking about which problems to go try to solve, which applications to work on, maybe even specific applications that you are like, if somebody can figure this out, they'll do really well in the ecosystem? Any thoughts on that?
So I think on the so it really depends what you're looking to build. Literally, there is, if I were to say in terms of what's required in the blockchain verse, the answer would be everything. Like we need better ways to manage NFTs, even simple, like there's something which would seem very intuitive, like a good NFT wallet. I've struggled to find one which solves problems like, for example, just displaying NFTs and doing price discovery and some of the basics. Similarly, like if you were to look on the NFT side, while there've been lots of different punks or lots of different NFT series, there've been not a lot of innovation around how you could use the ERC 1155 standard, which can also hold, which can stack NFTs, which can also hold ERC20 tokens, and then there's a fair amount of innovation which can happen there. On the DeFi side as well, like once you look past the basics of, let's say, borrowing and lending and stablecoin issuance, you can sort of look at things like derivatives, options, and also I would encourage people to look into something like Lumpus DAO, which in my opinion represents a very interesting way of solving a lot of the problems within the DeFi ecosystem. So I think if and again, there's so much on the infrastructure side as well, whether it is, building something like, I don't know, like Infura's ITX or something like that. Like there's just so many ways you can contribute to this ecosystem. I think the smart move is to look at some of the newer interesting solutions out there in the DeFi and the NFT space. Look at some of the documentation related to these standards, and then just try and play with it. And I think a great way of understanding what the community needs or wants is to be a part of these DAOs, is to sort of be a part of many of these open discussions. That's what I encourage everyone to do. Just be a part of the community, contribute to the community, and you'll begin to understand what's needed and what's not. And in my opinion, that is the best way to start. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say problem discovery in crypto and blockchain, actually, usually you can start with Twitter and Discord, because people complain a lot about a lot of things, right? Because the whole ecosystem is so nascent. We're still very much a day one situation here. And I'll also encourage you to, if I were in your position, look to infrastructure protocols similar in nature to like the chain links of the world, the graphs of the world, where they are not like a base layer or layer 2. They're not a DeFi app, but they provide an essential service to a lot of projects, right? And that puts them in a very desirable position, and you're doing something valuable. So, and to discover what the next thing is, then you want to start with one, like again, listening to pain points, and two, start building yourself so that you personally become like aware of, oh my gosh, it's so hard to build this because of that. And why isn't anyone doing that? And if you could start coming up with a design for a decentralized service to solve that developer pain point, like you will create a very valuable project that a lot of people want to work with.
Yeah, so I agree with Alan's take that you should like find the pain point yourself, but I want to give a slightly counterintuitive advice. Like if you want to help solve the problems that are obvious now, then like the best way is probably to join a project that is working on them, because like the obvious problems, someone is already working on them. So like a really interesting way to do something new, like if you want to start your own startup and project or whatever, would be to see, like to imagine that the problems we have today are all solved. No more scalability problems, like it's infinitely scalable, transactions are very cheap. No more problems with the infrastructure, oracles, whatever. Like this is all solved. Like what's next? Like once the obvious things are there, what is going to be the next problem once this is done? So this is how we approach the scalability back then. So like scalability was not the burning need 3 years ago. The gas was super cheap. You could transact for a few cents, and like there were very few users, and everyone was like talking about building DeFi and some applications to actually power this thing. But we thought, okay, once they build it, what's going to be next? Next, they're going to face the scalability problem, because it's like it is a necessity for them to reach the scale. So this is one way to think about it. And the other way, like if you want to join something, like we are hiring very actively. We have a lot of open positions in the technology. Please DM me or look up ZK Sync job descriptions on zksync.io or on our Twitter. And yeah.
Awesome. You actually just jumped ahead of the next question I was going to ask. Dan in the chat asked that basically he's with a group that's really interested in Matter Labs and ZK Syncs. How can they get involved, either investing or joining the community? And I'll try to make it a more broad question for everybody. How can folks get involved?
I'll post my Twitter in the chat, and
Perfect.
people can just DM me.
Yeah, I'll also just actually put my Telegram right here. So you can just DM me, and we can just, like, we also are growing very rapidly. We have positions open across technology, business, marketing. So if you want to get into whatever you find interesting, if there's some way you'd like to contribute, just get in touch with me, and then love to figure out how we can sort of work together.
Yeah, likewise, we're going through hyper growth right now and have openings across the board. You don't have to be technical to join us. We have a lot of demand for marketing and BD and community building talents as well.
That's exciting. One thing I always tell people is I feel like there's so many more opportunities in the space than people who can fit those shoes. So if you are interested and you're smart and you're scrappy, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, and for to address the last question, we are also looking for non-technical positions, also in the legal area. So please DM and let's talk.
Awesome. We have a job board. I know Polygon's on there. I think Boba might be on there. But I'm going to reach out to you, Alex and Alan, if I don't have you on there, to make sure that we get you all added. Question from Nitish. Can you dive deeper into the difference between more, and this is for Arjun, between more viable plasma versus roll-up solutions? Do you think the interval timing related to plasma solutions can cause throughput issues since you have to wait for the interval to end and for the block to be published? Yeah, so that was the question.
Sure, definitely. So again, it depends on the kind of implementation you have, but the basic difference between plasma and a roll-up, generally being that with plasma, what you're essentially doing is that you have a side chain, which is like you have a chain running parallel to Ethereum, and then you sort of are checkpointing onto Ethereum, and then essentially and all of those checkpoints can be challenged by anybody within the Ethereum network. So it's something like you could say a fraud proof of sorts, and then there's a 7-day period in which somebody can sort of prove that can either prove it's a fraud or not, that checkpoint, and then essentially if it is a fraud, then there is a slashing mechanism. So that's kind of like what plasma is in a nutshell about. And then there are various types, like there's more viable plasma, there are a bunch of other types as well. With the rollups, of course, the way rollups work is a little different. Again, you may have to look into optimistic and ZK rollups, but in a sense, like I said, you are essentially taking execution outside of Ethereum, and what you're doing is that you're performing the execution, and then you're rolling up that data and putting that onto the Ethereum chain. And by rolling up, essentially, you are putting the proof of the computation on the chain and on Ethereum, and you're putting just enough data to prove that proof on Ethereum, and then anybody on sort of Ethereum can recreate that proof and check if the proof is correct or not. And then you can use a series of bonds like an optimistic rollups to sort of game theoretically ensure that the fraud proof is correct. And ZK rollups, of course, you use a ZK circuit to prove whether the transaction is correct or not. So I encourage you to look into it. Of course, we have the stalwarts, both Alan and Alex here, who can explain this in far more detail than I can. But this is the basic concept. And with rollups, since you're putting that data on chain, you can recreate that proof on chain. While in Plasma, you can't. The sort of the Plasma chain is running parallel to the Ethereum chain. It's a different chain altogether, and you're not sort of putting that proof and that data onto Ethereum. So thereby the trust is a little less, like you're trusting the Plasma chain operator versus maybe in a roll-up case where there is like much higher security, because you can practically basically recreate the proof. And I can maybe post a link which might help understand this. So let me just do that right away.
Awesome. While you post that, I got one last question for you all. Hopefully this one is a little bit less, a little more exciting. Completely ignoring what you do on a day-to-day basis, focused on scalability and focused on your company. What are you most excited about in the crypto space? It's not financial advice. It can be anything, a project, a concept, person. What are you most excited about in the crypto space, completely ignoring what you do on a day-to-day basis?
I am most excited about the DAO phenomenon. It's like truly phenomenal, revolutionary. And with DAO, so DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Think of these as a digital version of co-ops with using crypto to align economic incentives. It's powerful because it enables anybody who wish to contribute to any DAO, any crypto projects, to do so. And it doesn't matter where they are located, what age they are, gender, race, none of that matters. All that matters is what do you bring to the table? What can you do? Can you code? Can you build a community? Can you help market? Can you help spread the word? Like anyone can do that. And this is the first time where anyone could then build using sweat equity to build a crypto portfolio and a financial portfolio for themselves. Truly permissionless. It's amazing.
Exciting.
I'll build on top of that. And what I'm especially excited about is like DAOs reaching the scale of cities and states, like building a network state on using DAO and blockchain, like organizing in a crypto nation and being able to collectively protect your interests against like a very powerful group of interests.
That's powerful.
Definitely. I mean, same here. Unfortunately, it's DAO is something which has totally captured my imagination as well. And for me, I think maybe let me give a little bit of a different perspective. So I look at it from like how you compare so this using this concept of tokenization and how it is different from the way you think about a typical Web2 company versus, let's say, a crypto company, right? So a typical Web2 company goes through your typical life cycle where you raise private equity, then you go public at some point, and then your company is public, and then you're responsible for quarterly results. In crypto, you are public from day one. From the day you launch and your token is out there, you're public, and there's a responsibility to the community on how you have to grow and sort of build your project. And why this is important is that's why it's like when you try to build a Web3 business, you actually need to think like a Fortune 500 company versus really a tech startup, because now what the public thinks about what you're doing is now extremely important, just like how it is for a Fortune 500 company. And when you put tokenization into the mix, like what I definitely feel is the future is a token economy. The future is that companies will be DAOs, that the shareholders of that company will sort of collectively make decisions, acting in the best interests of what has to be done. And the whole concept of equity goes away, right? So this is most interesting, that you could set up an entity, you could have 99% control of that sort of equity wise of that company, but the real ownership of the company is inside a smart contract, which has tokens in it. And then you use the tokens to the tokens can be then used for governance proposals, etc. So when you start thinking about how your mind needs to rewire itself from, let's say, Web 2 to a Web3 kind of thinking, that's when you really begin to understand the true power of what a DAO can be. And of course, like it's like, as one might say, a Super Saiyan ultimate form of what Alex talked about, where essentially a DAO becomes like a nation state. And then you start taking decisions at that level, like many countries do through referendums, by the way, like Estonia for that matter. So there's a precedent for this. It's not something crazy we're talking about right now. It will happen, and this for me is truly something which will change the way we live and how we work, what our identity is, what it means to have a nationality, or what does nationality even mean in that context. It'll sort of really change the way I think how we think about a lot of things, and that is what really excites me about DAOs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think a major takeaway is for all of you all to go look more into DAOs, because these are three leaders in the space and they're all pushing in the same direction. And just want to say thank you all. I learned a ton talking to all of you. I'm sure all the audience did as well. We appreciate your time, and we are all excited to see you all continue to push out there and continue to build out the future of Ethereum.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us as well. Thank you, CK.
Thank you all.
Thank you, CK. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. You all have a great rest of the day.
Look forward to hearing from all of you.